Bookstore. We're so happy to have you here this evening. We are Houston's oldest independent bookstore. We celebrate 50 years next year, so we are getting ready for our big 50th birthday party next year. Thank you for coming. We have events like this all the time. We do in-person events, we have virtual events, we have book clubs. If you're interested in keeping up with our calendar, you can grab one of our bookmarks and go to our website, which the address is on the bookmark, and you can see our full calendar. We're building out 2024 right now, so don't be alarmed that you don't see a lot right now. We also don't do in-store events in December, so again, don't be alarmed if you see that there's nothing happening in December. We actually are going to be setting up for the holidays on Monday, and we're going to be putting in our displays, which means that we can't push things off to the side and bring in chairs, which is why we don't do events in December. So don't be alarmed if you see that we don't have anything coming up immediately. We will be back with full energy in January. You can also sign up for our mailing list. We send a newsletter out every Tuesday morning with new events, new releases, information about the store, things like that. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter and keep up with us. One more important piece of information, we do have a restroom. It is through the back door that says employees only. Follow the orange line on the floor around to your left, and that will take you to the restroom. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Ellen and let you guys get started.
Thank everyone for showing up this evening. This is always my favorite night of the year, after Halloween, because we get to hear all the cool stories and poems people have written. WiVLA stands for Women in the Visual and Literary Arts, and we are an organization that brings together women who are visual artists, women who are literary artists, and some who are both, and help them network, get in the marketplace. We just had a showing down at the, what is that place called? The Post, which is apparently a really cool place that I have only been to once when I went to the opening exhibit. So you get to go to a lot of cool places, like Brazos Bookstore. So I would like to bring up the first reader, and her name is Alicia Richardson. She is a member of the Houston Writers Guild, and she'll be telling us a little bit about that.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Alicia Richardson. I'm the CFO of the Houston Writers Guild, and we're an organization, we've been around since about 1997. Roger Paulding, if you're familiar with Roger, he was the original founder. And currently, we're an organization that attempts to help writers get the resources they need and build the community that they need to be successful. We offer critique groups, so we have some in person and some online. So if you're interested in that, we can get you hooked up. We also have a thing on Saturday morning on Zoom called Social Saturday, and it's about an hour. Sometimes we go over, but we have a Zoom call, and once in a while we'll have a presentation, but most of the time we just talk about stuff that writers talk about. And we also have a spring conference and a fall conference, and between Harvey and COVID, everything's gotten kind of changed up a lot. This year we had a one-day workshop in the spring that was Love Your Writing, and then we had a fall conference that was Author Palooza, so we kind of combined our normal Indie Palooza with our traditional publishing spring conference for Author Palooza. So those are some of the things that we offer at the Houston Writers Guild. And of course, members get discounts on any workshops and conferences that we have. And we try to do some things in the summer. We have like a summer series, so like a monthly workshop or event. We have been doing it at the library in Sugar Land, but anyway, so that's the Houston Writers Guild. I put out a short story collection. I have a variety of pen names, so it's all my pen names. And it's called Creepy Christmas 2023, and it's available in paperback and ebook, and I'm working on the audiobook, so that will be out soon. So this is an excerpt from the first story. The Christmas Pony by Artemis Greenleaf. Violet and Allison peered into the shop window. Evergreen garland trimmed with red velvet bows framed the plate glass. A brightly colored electric train ran around the circumference of the display window, drawing the eyes of passers-by. "Gran, would you look at this?" Allison jumped up and down, pointing to the black and white pinto rocking horse featured in the display. "It's lovely," the girl's grandmother replied. "Can we go in and have a look?" Violet asked, her eyes beseeching. "Only a look, girls. I expect it's very expensive. Looks like an antique." The two girls rushed into the boutique, nearly bowling over a frazzled woman with an armload of shopping bags. "Sorry." Gran gave the woman a tense smile. She nodded wearily and trudged out of the shop. Allison and Violet stood in front of the display, smitten by the carved wooden horse. Its glossy black, real horsehair mane flowed down past the bottom edge of its neck. And the same kind of red bow that graced the garland was clipped into the forelock that covered its huge glass eyes. "I would name her Blaze." Allison nodded matter-of-factly. Violet cocked her head toward her younger sister. "Too common. I know you're just in second grade, Allie, but you have to agree she needs a more regal name." "Queenie?" "No." Violet thought for a moment. "What about Zephyr? That's the name of the west wind. I bet she could fly like the wind if she were a real pony." "Oh, she could take you anywhere you can imagine, as fast as you please." The shopkeeper, a scrawny man with a few limp hairs combed across the top of his head, stood suddenly beside them. The girls recoiled and scurried to their grandmother. "Imagination is a powerful thing indeed," Gran said, a hand on each little girl's shoulder. A greasy smile seeped across the proprietor's over-wide mouth. "No imagination required." He patted the horse's worn saddle. "Just sit on the horse and think it, and you're there." Gran raised an eyebrow. "Alas, we shall have to take your word on that. Come on, girls. We have to go and find your mother. She's on sale, rock bottom price." Violet turned to the shopkeeper. "How much?" He raised his hands. "Oh, never mind. Your grandmama is in a hurry. Zephyr needs a special owner, someone who has time to get to know her. She isn't just some ordinary object to be snatched from a shelf, stuffed into a bag, and carried off." Gran rubbed the bridge of her nose. Had his Christmas Eve sales been so slow that he's smarming a 10-year-old? Allison turned to the wiry man. He tipped his head toward the rocking horse. "Give her a little pat." Both girls reached tentatively into the display. Violet stroked the painted wooden cheek, and Allison combed her fingers through the silky mane. "Girls, we're the last ones in the shop. I'm sure they're ready to close up and get to their families." "We don't close for another 5 minutes," the proprietor assured her. She scowled back at him. "How much did you say, mister?" Violet looked up from the horse's delicately carved face. He put his hands on the tops of his thighs and bent at the hip until his eyes were level with hers. "Well," he reached out and patted the saddle again. "If, and only if, Zephyr wants to go home with you, and because it's Christmas Eve, I would consider letting her go for a very, very special price." Both the girls' eyes widened. Gran's eyes rolled. $1,000, $500? She was no antiques expert, but the horse looked very similar to a hand-carved Victorian-era carousel horse her cousin had bought, and she'd paid a pretty penny for that. If it wasn't an original, it was an excellent reproduction. "What do you think, my beauty?" The shopkeeper put his hands on the sides of the horse's face. "Do you like these girls?" "What does she say?" Allison squirmed next to her sister. "Oh, she likes you very much," he grinned. "Very much indeed." "Girls, I'm sure our 5 minutes are up." $1. The three shoppers turned to the man. "What did you say?" Gran slid her purse back up to her shoulder. $1. A single portrait of George Washington. Gran cocked her head to one side, then the other. "What's the catch?" That is the end of my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia. And you remind me that there are several of our writers here tonight who have books here to sell on consignment, in addition to anything else you might want to buy while you're here, right? Okay. Our next reader is a WiVLA member that I've tried many times to get on the board, and she has withstood all of my begging and pleading, and yes, Denise Bossarte.
So the hat comes into play here in a little bit. Thank you, Ellen. So I'm Denise Bossarte, and this is a brand new story that I've written, and it could tweak it just a little bit to fit the theme, so I thought we'd be good. It's called These Stars Are Not Mine. I let the smoke ease out of my nostrils with a sigh, tilting my head back to rest against a hard concrete wall as I watched the curl disappear towards a narrow slice of sky visible from the alley. It was Halloween night, and I was psyching myself up to go out onto the streets and join the crowd of parents herding children on sugar highs who were pretending to be something they weren't. I closed my eyes, denying myself the view of the stars and the longing that threatened to burst forth. Instead, I focused on the last bit of the sun's warmth radiating from the wall, which was seeping through my thin shirt into my back, a small comfort against the evening's chill. The thrum of a bass pulsed against the wooden door down the alley for me, and although I couldn't distinguish the words, I knew by heart every note and every word of the song playing inside the small bar. It was Genevieve's first big hit, the one she had debuted here at the only bar in her nowhere hometown. The first place I had heard her and thought I had finally found a kindred spirit on this insane planet. I gritted my teeth and concentrated on reaching my eye through the wall to where a very drunk man and woman were having sex in the handicapped stall of the women's bathroom. I was leaning against this particular spot because it was the closest I could get to the lovers hooking up at the bar each weekend. I gasped as the wave of desire, need, pleasure, and guilt washed over me. Humans had such sweet, strong emotions, such conflicting tangles of light and dark energy. I continued to bathe in the flow of their raw emotions, just past the time my scheme filled. I let their passion give me a moment of amnesia until they climaxed. All too soon, they exited the bathroom, and I was left alone again with my memories. I lifted my eyes, at last giving myself permission to look at the stars I had been avoiding all night. I felt the beads of moisture from my sampan gland slide down my fingers to drop to the dusty gravel at my feet. Humans would not recognize these as tears, but I wept. Tonight was the 5th anniversary of the crash, where I had lost my squeak, my team, my siblings. We had survived the genetic manipulations, rounds of surgery, and traveled through endless space to reach this planet, only for them all to die when a perfect storm of disasters had overwhelmed our ship. All the hopes of generations of my people ruined. My bitter laugh echoed down the alleyway at the irony that it was the crash of this nation's Voyager 1 spaceship on my home that had begun our efforts to reach out to this blue dot in space. And here I stood, the one true monster of the night, hesitant to go out in public, the only time of year I could show my real self without fear. Although I cannot see the star of my world with my naked eyes from anywhere on this planet, let alone this patch of sky, my mind still imagined it was there above me, pulling me home. The familiar sense of failure settled onto me, encasing me from head to foot, bleaching my bones. I had been too broken, too traumatized by my losses to follow the protocols of first contact after the crash. I had done my best to slip into the human world as another invisible body amongst the billions of others, attempting to hide from my failures as I hid my alien origins. Tonight, I was singing my lament silently to those stars that were not mine, in honor of lost lives and lost hopes, silently singing until it was nearly midnight. Then I dropped the cigarette to the ground, grinding out its light with the heel of my boot, until all I was left with or the pale flickerings of a million lights slowly rotating above me through the dark night as I walk to the end of the alley and onto the street. And if you're interested in dark urban fantasy, I do have my books on consignment here if you want to check that out. Thank you much.
Yes, and what I have not said yet is how grateful I am to Brazos Bookstore because this is our third Haunted Holidays reading. The first one was via Zoom because we were still in the middle of a pandemic, and now twice we've had it here in the store, and all my friends, the skeletons, get to come out with me in public and enjoy the stories as well. All right, our next reader is my new neighbor, Jere Pfister.
Well, a little low for me. A Thursday night, I read another section of a book that I've finished. I mean, I've got the final. I guess an editor somewhere or an agent could make me change things. That would be fine. The Shift of Dreams is the second part before we get into longer chapters. A dream woke me on the morning I began writing. I was in New Orleans in a big old house that seemed familiar. It was the house on Delgado Street, and I had to care for the baby. And then I realized the baby is me. There are electric wires strung from the ceiling fixtures leading into the other rooms. Lots of women abound. My aunts, I can't even remember. Just a faint picture, like looking through a scrim that is not backlit. You must squint your eyes and still you can't make out the faces. My mother is there, and there is an old woman, her mother. Where am I going with this? I lift the baby into my arms. Her diaper is soiled. I wash her and call out for another diaper, but no one brings me one. And then there are men and young boys walking around the room we are in. I am waiting for someone to bring me clothes for the baby. The baby tells me she wants a diaper. The baby is naked, and I cover her with a blanket. A voice tells me not to worry. Babies need time to be naked every day. They like their freedom, but this baby wants a diaper. There is a photo of me, not naked, but sitting on my potty, my mother holding me. She is proud because I am so young and she has trained me to the pot. I don't need to wear diapers anymore. Not her baby. Did my mother remove my diapers? Was I just naked and exposed all the time? Terrified of the toilet, of the swirling water? Does a baby need time to be attached to its bowel movements, its pee? Stay with the picture, the dream images. So the men are walking around looking at the pretty little girl baby. And this voice is telling me that the baby needs naked time. But the baby is telling me it wants a diaper. I finally listen to the baby's voice. I realize how labia and vulva are exposed to the gawking eyes of strangers. I go to the shop in a mall filled with small vendors. There are beautiful white gowns, the essence of the feminine. The gowns are like white cotton diapers, and there are the soft flannel covers for the baby. The woman who sells them is not my mother, is not my aunt, but is not my family. She is some part of me, a guide to how to diaper a baby that got lost in the shovel between a depression, a world war, and a pair of alcoholic parents.
All right, the next reading I've been a little excited to hear. Jean and I emailed a little bit, so I have some hints of where you're going, but I really want to hear this, where you land. So, Jean King.
Okay, sometimes houses have a soul or a spirit that's all their own, and sometimes it holds all of the memories of what came before. And this house, in this tale, was an old 2-story house. It was divided up among 5 people. And once upon a time, it felt like a refuge. It had many stories to tell, and this is one. Aftermath, Thanksgiving, 1972. It had never been her favorite holiday. So much work to prepare, so much to clean up. This year, everyone in the house drew straws to see who would wash up afterwards. It certainly hadn't been his day, that much was certain. From upstairs, she could just barely hear him in the kitchen below her, but she knew the sounds: running water, dishes angrily slammed first onto the counter and then into the sink, and the low, steady mumble of his commentary to himself on his fate as dishwasher. There was a pause in the sounds, a difference. She had become sensitive to the pauses, those silences that preceded the storm. A voice, this time not his, a younger voice, the pitch higher, followed by laughter. She went slowly down the wide stairs, staying close to the wall to avoid the creaking of the old, bare wooden treads. She silently begged the old house to let her pass through soundlessly, drawing no attention. She paused, waiting on the broad landing, holding her breath to better hear what was being said. The voice wasn't quite loud enough for the words to be distinguishable. She crept the rest of the way down the stairs to the living room. Caution that she had learned over this past short time living with him kept her movements slow and silent as she crept across the threadbare oriental rug that covered the worn wood living room floor towards the wide double pocket doors which opened onto the dining room. She waited a moment and then moved stealthily into the dining room, keeping close to the wall, creeping toward the kitchen door, careful to keep out of his line of sight. Now she could tell the other voice. It was Tom. Tom was speaking now. No, jeering was more like it. The word going on, and he was going on and on about how finally he was going to have to do some work around this house. His silence continued. No sound of movement, no slamming, crashing dishes, just the slow, steady flow of the water in the sink. Still, Tom kept at him, and she wondered that he didn't know what everyone else in the house seemed to know about his temper and his violence. She could have sworn that Tom was home the last time that the yelling and the blows had started. Didn't he know he needed to stop? The silence wasn't the sound of anything except his gathering rage. She moved slowly toward the kitchen, intent on trying to defuse the situation, trying to think quickly enough to say just the right thing, to take just the right action to stop the inevitable explosion. But then she froze. It felt as though something clicked in her head, and time slowed down. She closed her eyes and tried to picture the kitchen with its strange old mint green prefabricated metal cabinets and sink on the left wall, the gray linoleum floor with its worn path mapping the route from the door to the sink, then to the refrigerator in the far corner, meandering on to the old chambers stove next to the immediate left of the kitchen door, and back to the sink, completing the circuit. The wall to the right side of the door was raw shiplap, blank except for a small niche with an ancient black dialed phone, and next to it the calendar. Somehow that calendar was the only thing she could picture clearly. Thumbtacked on the kitchen wall, it was an out-of-date calendar promoting a nearby Tex-Mex restaurant with a faded image of an Aztec warrior looking pleadingly to the heavens and holding the lifeless body of his Aztec princess. The image suddenly made her shudder with a sense of foreboding. Although it was November, the calendar was trapped in July 1970. Tom's voice brought her back to the present as he made one last comment about how manly he looked up to his elbows in soapy water. That was all it took. At that moment, she looked around the doorframe to where he stood at the sink. She knew immediately what was already happening. There was nothing to say or do. Only let this run its course and get out of the way. She had been the target too many times before, and having been his target, she knew better than to let him see her. She stepped back. This was not her battle, and she wasn't going to be in the middle now. She saw him reach into the soapy water and pull out the butcher knife. Neither hero nor coward, she stepped further back, away from the kitchen doorway. She heard the growling sound he made, and she knew exactly the expression on his face, a look like the devil himself was in control. A thud, and then what seemed to be an unending, inhuman scream. She lurched back to the doorway, expecting to see Tom with the butcher knife embedded up to its hilt in his chest. Instead, an even stranger sight appeared. Tom stood, face the color of ash, staring at him. He was screaming with his hand still on the knife. Blood was everywhere. It took a moment to register. He was so close to the wall she thought he could have kissed it. The knife was absurdly struck into the heart of the Aztec hero on the calendar, stuck into the calendar, but had gone no further. It was stuck into the hard, unforgiving shiplap wall of the old house. It was unable to penetrate any further into the age-hardened wood. He stood, still holding the knife, but not the handle. Instead, his hand was wrapped around the blade, tight against the now bloodied Aztec hero in his love. He had run his hand down the length of the blade. When he released the blade, she could see that he had cut through his fingers to the bone, severing tendons, muscles, nerves, everything. And he was still screaming as she found herself marveling at the blue whiteness of the bones. She felt disconnected, cold. As she calmly got the dish towel to wrap around his hand in an attempt to staunch the bleeding, she had three distinct thoughts. She needed to call for an ambulance. He had made a horrible mess that she would have to clean up. And for now, the beatings would stop. Thanksgiving would never be the same. Perhaps this old house really was her safe space, her refuge, her protector.
I loved where you went with that. And if people wonder why we have haunted stories around this time of year, it's actually a very old tradition where people, I guess, in countries where it gets dark at night and it's cold, not 75 like it was today, but you're drinking the hot chocolate and you're sharing stories and the scary stories because it's dark outside and all that. So it's a long tradition of holiday scary stories. And next, also holiday scary poetry. And last year, I heard Gabrielle's poetry for the first time, and I have been a fan ever since. So I'm so glad you are back again this year. I wouldn't have let you get by without coming. So, Gabrielle Langley.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm delighted to be back here. Thank you so much. And thank you to the staff of Brazos Books. They're staying past closing time, and that's a labor of love. If any of you have worked retail, you know. Thank you very much for being here. I am going to read a couple from my newest book, which is for sale here at Brazos. It's called Fairy Tale. This one is called Happy Birthday, John Keats. Great romantic poet John Keats was born on Halloween. Happy birthday, John Keats. A choir of ghosts sings in the air vent, and I am too tired to fall asleep. Fairy tale pumpkins roll themselves in the attic. Riesling is spilled over baked apples. Ice crystals dance in the flames. Long arms sheathed in black, holding the scent of cedar planks, camphor, and cinnamon. The winnowing of one giant dictionary, a surgeon's apprentice, never admits fatigue. If you eat everything on your plate, it will stop the hunger of children, will freeze your boots to the ground, will be the cure for tuberculosis. Lord Byron asks, would you like another glass of cider? He was a noble savage, pouring black pepper into his throat. But Keats is riding his father's horse down Stratford Street, and Fanny Braun scissors the ribbons of her corset. Withered violets drown in the leaves. Jack-o'-lanterns gleam in a child's room. Tortoiseshell cats dance in the trees. The poet is a surgeon wielding a scalpel with no anesthesia. The pen dances to its own song across an empty page while we learn to make soup out of apples and wine. This next one is a poem. It's called The Willies. And the Willies are in Northern European folklore. The Willies are the ghosts of young maidens who were betrayed by their lovers. Blue violets blooming from their fingertips, forgotten nocturnes, the old women drinking schnapps, the soldiers laughing when a girl is jilted. There is a tombstone, a white ballet. There is a sky of Prussian blue, waiting, weeping, tree roots tangled in their hair. The women wearing pale gauze. The women wearing pale gauze. Tree roots tangled in their hair. Waiting, weeping. There is a sky of Prussian blue. A white ballet. There is a tombstone. When a girl is jilted, the soldiers laughing, drinking schnapps. The old women, forgotten, nocturnes, blooming from their fingertips, blue violets. Crimson Dance, this is inspired by the fairy tale of Hans Christian Andersen about the little girl who wanted the red shoes, and once she had them, she couldn't stop dancing. And it's also about a dance injury, which happens to dancers a lot. It's Crimson Dance. Dance in thy red shoes until thou art pale and cold. Too much dancing in this witch's spell. The ceaseless music no one else hears. The smallest bones compressed in satin slippers. Her Achilles tendon burns, sizzles, pops like chestnuts, like bacon catching fire. Soft tissue stripped from bone until a bright, snow-white skeleton is dancing in a red silk dress, is twirling on the scent of burning leaves. Thank you.
I have that book and I can highly recommend it.
Thank you.
And I could see the ballet dancers throughout the whole thing. This was nice. All right, now comes one of my favorite writers. You never know where she's going to go, where she's going to land, but I'm very delighted to introduce Margo Stutts Toombs. Thank you.
First, I want to say, Jerry, I love your hat. I must get one like it. I love it.
Somebody gave it to me when I
Uh-oh,
walked in.
well, we'll have to investigate
So,
that.
I'll pass it on to you.
Okay. I'm going to read an abecedarian poem. So that means the first word in every line starts with the next letter of the alphabet. And this poem was recently published in the Equinox through Hot Poets. Ages ago, before Christmas became a winter holiday, cottages deep in the forest housed witches, adorned in moss and webs. They divined spells to wrap their homes in glorious foliage every winter after the first snow. Female energy guided this magic. For centuries, humans and sorcerers lived in parallel worlds. Ivy and vines kept people away from these sacred haunts. But eventually, jealousy ruins everything. Humans could not keep away from the solstice cottages. Leaders of the church claimed winter for Christmas, splitting the season in two, making all manner of dwelling fodder for lights and tinsel, then darkness. Nature's creatures urged people to stay away. Bats circled, birds screamed, slugs oozed. But the forest folk could not understand their language. They pushed past the flora, snapped twigs, smashed leaves, quenching their curiosity, revamping the cottages in Christmas baubles. Simple fools. They cut down spruce and threw on garland, lights, and colored tinsel until the enchanters could stand no more and rose up, voicing curses, turning these revelers into weeds. Dandelions, daisies, clover, with their tiny human faces frozen in horror, existing with the other wild flowers that spring up during Yule. These sad, misguided souls remain in the forest today, zombie weeds for the holidays.
Thank you, Margo. Our next reader is Sandi Stromberg. I lost her. There she is.
Also here is my book, which just came out this year, Frogs Don't Sing Red, book of poetry that Brazos has there for sale. And I became a poet because of WiVLA in 1999. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I feel like it was birthed inside that organization. And I'm going to read a poem it's going to appear in Windover Poetry Journal in February, and it's a place that takes spiritual pieces, because sometimes things happen to us that are like white magic. So I'm going to take you on a journey. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, packed and bundled in my forest green Mustang, I am driving through a Minnesota snowstorm, taking Marcia home to funeral rites for her father. In the classic story of a middle-aged businessman, he laid down on the couch after work tonight, and his heart stopped. I head south on US Route 52, having stepped in as the Good Samaritan to get her home when it's midnight and nothing else is moving in the brutal weather. I follow the meandering artery of the two-lane highway often rutted and potholed, that cuts diagonally from Minneapolis to Dubuque. A 256-mile journey. Snow flies furiously against the windshield. The night as dark and moonless as my thoughts. I ride in ponderous silence. What can be said in the face of death? I clutch the wheel, knuckles white and glowing, as I guide the car over deserted roads whose edges I can only guess. I take curves with caution, the invisible devil of black ice a threat. The car heater blows against our faces, but doesn't dry Marcia's tears. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, enveloped in blackness, I slow too late for a curve. The car spins. I hear my dad's harping words. He's the one who taught me to drive. Turn into the spin. But the ditch rises up to claim the valiant Mustang. Shocked and shivering, I grab Marcia. The car, the ice, and us locked in an impossible embrace. It's 2 a.m., a back-country road between small towns. The gas gauge warns, I can't sit here long with the engine running. Black ice has outwitted me, knows I am not dressed to leave the car, not strong enough to push it through raging snow. Too paralyzed by fear and cold, my mind does not replay scenes from my life, but heartbeats syncopate. Ice crystals ping the car. There are no words to discuss death, none to express devastation. I have skated far into the clutches of black ice. No cars pass, the road deserted, houses invisible, such dark. We sit holding each other like the ice sculptures we may become. Minutes, hours, I no longer know what time means, only that we are stuck in a nameless place. And then, a mirage, a vision, a single light shines. Perhaps the moon is rising. The dark hulk turns toward us, and two bright headlights roll slowly in our direction. I stare, afraid to take my eyes away, afraid that this is a trick of the universe like black ice, afraid to hope like an automaton. I turn on my headlights again, the ones I turned off to preserve the battery, gas, whatever. As the giant force rumbles toward the car, Marcia whispers, her voice hoarse, "It's a snowplow. It's, oh my God, it's a snowplow." I honk with a fervor matching Joshua's crumple at the walls of Jericho until the machine stops. The driver steps down and over to my window, an unlikely angel, my savior, appears in a fleecy plaid jacket and a beard speckled with ice.
By gum, what are you two ladies doing out here on this road in this weather at this time of night?
In 20 minutes, I'm driving south again, mulling over his parting words.
You're lucky I kept going straight. At that intersection, I could have turned off, but something just made me keep going straight.
Yes, I forgot to mention, WiVLA also delves into performance art and is highly encouraged. All right, love that. Our next reader is Dedra Murchison. You're new to WiVLA, and tonight is the first time I get to hear you read, so I'm excited.
Thank you. This one I call 300 seconds. It's just 5 minutes. What if I have nothing to say? What if I go over? What if they laugh? What if they don't? What if I think of something better? What if I don't? What if it's not perfect? What if it is? What if it's not just 5 minutes? What if it's about the journey and not the destination? What if it's about the destination and the journey is what it is? What if I opened myself up for 5 minutes and spilled out all my fears? What if I need more time? What if I don't? What if 5 minutes is enough to start? When I was 6, I was scared of needles, belts, monsters under my bed, and the evil Snow Queen. Now, I hate needles. I loathe bullies who use guns to intimidate and control others. The monsters under my bed are dust bunnies and the occasional feral cat. I no longer fear the evil queen. Menopause has shown me that she had bad hot flashes. And this one is from my heart, and I ask that you please listen with your heart. At first, I was afraid. I was petrified. I kept thinking I could never sing with all this fear inside. I spent so many nights searching for my song. I grew strong, and I learned how to sing along. And now you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid note. I should have made that D a B. If I'd have known for just 1 second, you'd be back to sing off key. Go on, now go, walk out the door. Just turn around now, 'cause you're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who said, play it small and hide? You think I'd crumble? You think I'd curl up and die? No, not I. I will survive. Oh, as long as I know how to sing, I know I'll stay alive. I've got all my life to live, and I've got lots of songs to write, and I'll survive. I will survive. Hey, hey. It took all the strength I had not to fall apart, mending tiny little pieces of my broken, tender heart. And I spent so many nights singing softly to myself. I used to cry, but now I hold my head up high. And you see me, somebody new. I'm not that chained up little person singing out of tune. And so you felt like dropping in and just expect my voice to cease? Well, now I'm saving all my singing for the joy that follows peace. Go on now, go. Walk out the door. Just turn around now, 'cause you're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who used to say, play it small and hide? You think I'd crumble? You think I'd curl up and die? Oh, no, not I. I will survive. And as long as I know how to sing, I know I'll stay alive. I've got all my life to live, and I've got lots more songs to write, and I'll survive. I'll survive. I choose to thrive.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing from you reading again in the future. Well, then, last but not least, you get me.
Ellen, could I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
I forgot to credit my great collaborator. Jo Zeider is an artist with WiVLA, and she's been a member longer than I have. So, and she is a fabulous artist. So,
Yes, she is, and now we know, performance artist, your secret is out. Thank you so much.
An angel too.
All right. This is several pages long, but I have like 25-point font and double space so I can read it easily. This is an essay called Heart Heavy Doors. It reminded Julia of a Rorschach test. Not much of the building itself, but the windows. A lot of money was paid for those windows. Since none were simple squares or rectangles, all of the glass had to be specially made. It also made it impossible for one to tell how many floors the building had. Across the top of the building was the name, the Doctor's Hospital for Health, Recovery, and Rejuvenation. No matter how many times I walked to this building, Julia thought, the windows seemed to be looking right at me, just like some haunted portrait in a Victorian mansion. Did the dark gray concrete building look at everyone? Did it pretend good things if it did in fact look at you? Avant-garde, I believe they called it, Julia mused. The design style of the building, not the style of care received inside. Also, the building was cylindrical rather than square, rectangular. Once inside, there were corners. Why did I schedule this on November 1st, El Dia de los Muertos? The veils between the worlds is thin. Approaching the entry, Julia struggled with the heavy black doors that were included in a building supposedly designed for those with health problems. Fortunately, there was that familiar button off to the side that once pushed opened the entryway to the front lobby. Inside, everything changed colors from black and dark gray to white and light gray. It was stark, with one desk in the middle of the room, with one receptionist to check people in for appointments. This person wore black scrubs as if she were part of the medical team. Her long gray hair was pulled back neatly into a ponytail. As Julia looked at her, she saw that her eyes were dark and deeply ingrained shadows. Looking at her computer, the receptionist said, "First and last name, please." As Julia mumbled her answer, she realized the receptionist never looked at her, the patient. Her only interest was entering the correct information into the machine in front of her. "Date of birth, please." Again, Julia complied with an answer. These were the two questions that would be asked again and again. Julia couldn't tell if the hospital personnel did this to confirm they had the right info and the right patient, or if they were constantly testing her to see if she remembered her name and date of birth. Mental status questions were slipped into every conversation quite skillfully by all staff. Julia wondered how many patients practiced these responses before entering the building. Without looking at her, the receptionist stated, "Okay, Julia, you're checked in. Now, if you will go through the white door behind me, the one in the middle, you'll find a nurse ready to take you back for prepping. Did you bring an overnight bag? Just in case you need to spend the night, just in case." It was at this point that Julia felt control over her life and well-being was transferred from herself to all those who worked behind the white doors. "Just remember your name and birth date," Julia kept repeating in her mind as she wheeled her overnight bag behind her while entering the preparation area. As dark as the waiting room was, the prepping area was just the opposite. Lots of medical staff. All were wearing black scrubs and all with dark shadowed eyes. "Come right this way," Julia said one of the nurses. "Inside this cubicle, you will find a robe. It's supposed to be open in the back. Put it on, place your clothes with your bag, and we'll put everything in a locker. Of course, it will all be safe. You will have it back as soon as you hit the recovery room. Julia removed all of her clothing and placed everything in a plastic bag. As soon as she sat down on the bed, the nurse returned. Here is your wristband. Can you verify your name and date of birth? Along with the medical staff, there came machines, computers, tubes, and needles. Julia might as well have been strapped to the bed because she could not move. There was a beeping machine tucked behind her as if they didn't want her watching her own heartbeat. What is my blood pressure and pulse? Julia asked. Very good. Now you just rest until it's your turn. The nurse left, closing the gray curtains that marked the cubicle. The curtains around the cubicle were open just enough for Julia to see out. In addition to all of the medical personnel walking around and patients being wheeled around, Julia saw the others. It was her own special talent, seeing ghosts, spirits, and others from the departed realms. Given the date, there were more than usual. The special visitors consisted of mothers, grandmothers, fathers, siblings, aunts, and uncles. Occasionally there appeared someone who was just a really close friend. Most were giving blessings and sharing love. However, there were some patients who were being lectured by deceased loved ones. One more chance to chastise them for smoking, overeating, being unfaithful. The list of sins and wrongdoings could be very long. One spirit said, "My love, I look so forward to the day when we can be together again." This patient rested comfortably. However, all were not so lucky. "Just wait until I see you again. We may not wind up in the same place because of your cheating and lying. If you go to the bad place, I will not share any cool water with you. Look to all of your skanky cheating girlfriends for that." This particular deceased wife came to visit every year and chide her husband for doing her wrong through life. He was always afraid of dying, but without knowing exactly why. A specter floated into Julia's cubicle. She was a nice-looking elderly lady from somewhere during the golden era. She wore her hair piled on top of her head and wore a long lavender dress cinched off at the waist by a stiff corset. "Hello, honey. You don't even know who I am, do you?" "I don't think so," Julia replied. "I am your great, etc., grandmother. My name is Victoria. I find it interesting that none of your other relatives planned on visiting you today. You really made each other angry, and apparently everyone in your family holds grudges." "Well," Julia started, "I'm just as glad they aren't here. I'd hate to have to listen to any of them right before getting a heart procedure. You seem all right, though." "Sweetheart, it's almost as if we don't hate each other because we never got the chance to meet. After you've finished recovering from this procedure, it might help you to make peace with some of this historical baggage. It's not like you have that much time left." "After recovery," you said. "Does that mean I survived this procedure without any problems?" "Yes, you will recover. I don't guarantee that you won't have any more problems, though. Yet dealing with the long-held anger and resentment will only slow down the process of recovery." Julia laid back and shook her head. "I've heard this before, and I've never been interested. Maybe my pain meds are beginning to kick in, but I feel I might give it another try after this is over. As a matter of fact, it must be the drugs that are making the staff and even the building seem more normal than when I arrived. Do I have dark shadows around my eyes?" "Yes," Victoria replied, "but that will fade. You'll return to what I consider street normal quickly. Also, in case you need help with recovery, I'll give you another visit around the winter solstice. That's always a good time to work on healing on all levels. I swear I've never seen any family line that can hold on to a grudge like your family." And thanks once again to everybody for coming out. Thanks to our videographer, Melody. Okay.
And we need a group picture before you.
Oh, and, okay, so all the readers, while everybody's over there buying your books, we need a group picture up here. And again, thank you to Brazos. Amy has been my primary contact throughout this process, so thank you, Amy. And that's it.
Thank you, Ellen.
Evening.
And thank you, Ellen.
Let's do this again next year.